hand you over to our news department for a summary of all the day's top stories in the News Roundup.
It's a little stiffy. Let's go give him a bath.
Miles has been living on the streets.
A dog that is in the street has to compete for his food.
Tuesday, Cesar Millan's leader of the pack at 8:30 on Pearl.
喺我有第二胎嘅時候，返到屋企以為自己冇事，當時我好擔心肚裏邊個 BB， 我老公即刻打俾 Louis， 佢好清楚我個 plan， 佢叫我哋放心，醫生建議嘅治療都 cover 到㗎。我好珍惜今日有嘅一切。
英國寶城用心聆聽，更知你心。
每粒紐崔萊多寶營養片都係一個品質承諾。透過指紋圖譜技術，鎖定營養精華。呢個就係營養豐富嘅紐崔萊多寶營養片。
Pledge and trust for 30 years. Prince Jewellery and Watch.
洛士坦以蠟菊配合7元活基因子，破解衰老基因密碼，升華再生功效。洛士坦 Divine Cream 臨床實證能抗皺、重塑輪廓、修復歲月痕跡。全新 Divine 極致再生精華油隆重登場。L'Occitane en Provence.
The Ebola virus spreads through direct contact with the blood or bodily fluids of infected persons via broken skin or mucous membranes. It is not spread through the air or by food or water. To prevent infection, good hand hygiene is essential. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water, especially before touching your eyes, mouth, and nose. Wounds should be disinfected and covered properly.
Does red always go with meat and white with fish? And while Jeannie hosts a blind tasting event at a local wine society, Anthony goes to Bordeaux to see how wine barrels are made. Thursday, Dalloyor Paris since 1682 presents In Vino Veritas at 9:30 on Pearl.
The Exchange Fund posts massive losses in the third quarter. A proposal to shrink the occupation areas in return for more goodwill from the government. And 1.8 million signatures handed over to the government in support of government action against occupiers. Good evening and thanks for joining us. The Hong Kong Exchange Fund has posted massive losses in the third quarter, and the Monetary Authority is warning that Q4 is also looking volatile for the city's reserve. Diane Till reports.
It's the second time the Exchange Fund has been in the red since Q2 last year. The fund suffered a loss of $18.7 billion in the third quarter, dragged down by poor performance in foreign exchange and local stocks. Figures from the Hong Kong Monetary Authority show local equities swung to a loss of $200 million, while foreign equities posted a $2.8 billion gain. Foreign exchange did the worst, swinging to a $28.4 billion loss. But profits from bonds nearly quadrupled to $7.1 billion year on year. Overall, the Exchange Fund made $37.7 billion in the first 9 months, a 25% drop compared with the same period last year. Hong Kong Monetary Authority head Norman Chan warned of market volatilities to come in Q4. He cited concerns over the global impact of capital flows reversing as the Federal Reserve moves to up its interest rates.
It's still a big uncertainty over the timing and pace of the rise of U.S. policy interest rates. And also, in addition, the markets may react before the Fed actually raises the policy rates. So it's still uncertain, but most people in the market expect the first rate hike to take place middle of next year. And once that happens, I think that will have a major impact on global asset markets, including the property market in Hong Kong.
Chan said although the financial markets, interbank interest rate and the stock market index have been pretty stable so far, he warned about the negative impact on financial stability if the Occupy protests continue for a longer time. Chan also reiterated his support for the Hong Kong dollar's peg to the US dollar, saying it's the foundation of Hong Kong's financial system. This after recent suggestions by a top HSBC executive that the SAR should look into other options, including linking its currency to the renminbi. Diane To, TVB News.
Well, more people have been speaking out against the Occupy movement tonight. The Federation of Trade Unions says about 3,000 people took part in their anti-Occupy gathering at Chater Garden in Central. Representatives from various trades took turns to vent on stage about just how much the month-long occupation has affected their livelihoods. The Federation says that transportation, tourism, and retail industries have been hit the hardest since the Occupy movement began. It's calling on protesters to clear out of occupied areas. Well, these are more live shots from the Occupy movement entering now its 37th day today. Demonstrators, as you can see, still occupying some roads in Admiralty, Causeway Bay, and Mong Kok. There was some minor scuffling in Mong Kok tonight, but police have separated the two sides. Pan-Democratic legislators are still deciding whether or not to resign to trigger a de facto referendum on political reform. Stephanie Choi reports.
Pan-Democratic lawmakers remain split on whether they should resign, as suggested by student leaders and Occupy Central organizers, to trigger a de facto referendum on political reform. Civic Party leader Alan Leong admitted that figuring out how to extend the Occupy movement with a de facto referendum would be a challenge. People have pointed out to me that the Pan-Democratic lawmakers have long signed an agreement vowing to vote down all reform proposals that are based on the National People's Congress Standing Committee's framework, Leong said. They questioned why a de facto referendum is still necessary, he added. In 2010, 5 Pan-Democratic legislators from different geographical constituencies resigned to force a by-election. If history repeats itself, the Pan-Democrats will lose the power to veto. Sources say if that happens, pro-government lawmakers may amend LegCo regulations on filibustering. League of Social Democrats Lung Kwok-hung said he thinks a de facto referendum would return power to the people and give the Occupy movement a boost. Meanwhile, Civic Party lawmaker Claudia Mo proposed to ask that the government conduct a fair and comprehensive public opinion poll and reflect to the central government public sentiment against the screening of chief executive candidates. In return, she said, protesters can shrink the occupation areas. Mo said while she thinks it's unlikely that will happen, she hopes the government would make the first move. LegCo President Zhang Yuk-sing questioned whether the occupation will end or shrink in scale if lawmakers resign. He pointed out that what the Occupy movement lacks is the authoritative voice of a leader. Stephanie Choi, TVB News.
The Alliance for Peace and Democracy handed over its petition against the Occupy movement to the Chief Secretary today. Rani Samtani reports.
Alliance for Peace and Democracy spokesman Robert Chow said his group will be arranging meetings with lawmakers and student leaders to discuss how to solve the political impasse.
Having seen the mass and support of the Hong Kong people against their action, how would they react to such display of public opinion, and how do they intend to cease their action and give peace and order back to Hong Kong?
Chow submitted the 1.83 million signatures the alliance collected to Chief Secretary for Administration Carrie Lam. He said this proves that the public backs the government and the police to take action to remove demonstrators who are illegally occupying the roads. Meanwhile, more than 50 legal professionals, including lawmaker Priscilla Leung, gathered outside the High Court this afternoon to express their opposition to the Occupy movement. The group stood silently for a few minutes as a gesture of protest. The lawyers expressed concerns that the movement is causing harm to the rule of law in Hong Kong and disrupting people's lives. They added that the blatant disregard of the court injunctions granted against the blocking of roads in Mong Kok and outside CITIC Tower and Admiralty is not acceptable.
We are not here to against Occupy Central. We just want to show to public that we, as the officers of the court, we will defend and support rule of law in any event. I think as court and also as the police, they should know what are the laws, okay, and they should enforce the law.
Some demonstrators taking part in the ongoing occupation have said they will surrender themselves to the police at a later stage. But the lawyers explain that the law doesn't work that way.
If someone is committing a crime, and if law enforcement officers are trying to stop him, and then he said, I will surrender myself after I finish committing the crime, then this is absolutely ridiculous and against the rule of law.
The group of legal professionals urged demonstrators to leave the occupied areas in a peaceful way as soon as possible, and they called on the government to strictly enforce the law. The lawyers handed a statement to a representative of the Department of Justice demanding swift action to uphold the rule of law. Over in Mong Kok, tensions briefly flared this morning when at least 2 men tried to clear the barricades but were stopped by occupiers. Police stepped in to separate the two sides. Ronnie Samtani, TVB News.
In other news, a 29-year-old British man charged in the horrific murders of 2 women in Wan Chai made his first court appearance today. Police escorted Rurik George Jutting to Eastern Magistracy this morning. The court was told he wasn't allowed to contact a British consulate general or call his own lawyer while in police custody. The defense lawyer also said some media reports about his client could affect his right to a fair trial. No plea was taken and the case has been adjourned until next Monday. Police found an unconscious woman with stab wounds in the suspect's Wan Chai flat after receiving a call from him early Saturday morning. The woman died soon after. Investigators later found a second woman's body in a suitcase on the balcony. It was a record day today at the annual auction for Lunar New Year fair stalls at Victoria Park. The biggest fast food stall at the week-long affair went for more than $500,000. Despite government warnings, the event could be impacted by the Occupy protests. Diane Toh has more.
Day one of the auction saw 3 fast food stalls and 180 wet goods stalls put up for bidding. The average bottom price was up 4% compared with last year. Fierce competition for the biggest fast food stall located near the Sugar Street entrance. It was finally won by the same food and beverage group that got it last year at a record price of $570,000, $30,000 more than last year. The winning bidder said he'd heard beforehand that there would be little competition at the auction and had budgeted for just some $300,000 for the stall. But he said he's happy about the winning bid because it means people are still confident about the market despite the Occupy protests. The other 2 fast food stalls, which have smaller space, went for $410,000 and $360,000 respectively, both more than double the bottom prices. Bidders were also eager for wet goods stalls. That's despite a warning from the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department that the New Year fair could be cancelled or have its opening hours shortened because of the Occupy protests. In that case, the stall owners will be refunded on a pro rata basis. The auction will continue until Wednesday, with dry goods and thematic stalls up for grabs. The week-long Lunar New Year fair will be held from February the 13th to the 19th next year. Diane Toh, TVB News.
Elsewhere tonight, residents of separatist-controlled regions in eastern Ukraine voted to elect legislators and executives. But the elections, which were organized by pro-Russian separatists, are being called a farce by the Ukrainian government.
Democracy, Donetsk style. With gunmen never far away, the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic drew a steady stream of people to vote in an election that had no voters list. In general, everything went better than expected, said the head of the rebels' Central Election Commission. Organizers called the vote a decisive